All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Welcome to Creative Contraband.
Welcome to How to Be a Better DM, the show that helps dungeon masters tell better stories and run more engaging games. This is Creative Contraband, where we take ideas from elsewhere and smuggle them into our craft to take it one step further. And remember, all of this is brought to you by Session Zero Studios.
Hello! Welcome everyone, once again. It's very nice to have you here. If you have not been here before, my name is Daniel, you can call me Danny, and this is Creative Contraband, a segment for How to Be a Better DM, where we smuggle knowledge from other arts and apply them into our craft, which is dungeon mastering or game mastering. Today I have something of a lighter episode. What I will try to do is to take the Lord of the Rings trilogy and highlight how some moments can very much resemble DnD. It is a lighter episode because I am not feeling that good of my throat and stuff, so yeah. We're going to have a little bit of fun because inspiration also does not always have to be dense or theoretically deep for it to be useful. Most of the people in this hobby know that Tolkien has been very influential for D&D. He was one of the direct influences and inspirations for Gary Gygax when Gary was making this game. It is also known that it was so much so that the halflings were called hobbits before, and that led Tolkien's family to sue Gary Gygax, and he had to change the name of the hobbits for halflings. But Tolkien has not only been very influential for D&D, but for all of fantasy. He basically made the fantasy genre what it is today, so it should be no surprise that we're talking about Tolkien, and probably most of you are also fans of The Lord of the Rings. So yeah, I am now going to take some of those moments, some of those iconic moments, and I have tried to translate them into checks mostly and other role-playing things. So let's have some fun. So I've been told I tend to yap a little bit, so we are going to get right into it. First, in the Fellowship of the Ring, when we have the party trying to get into the Mines of Moria, and Gandalf is trying to remember the password, but he can't. A DM could frame this as maybe an Arcana check, because it is magic related, or maybe history or investigation even. Maybe it could also just be a puzzle for the table, for the party, and so you can skip the check itself, but make it a puzzle. Then when they are in the Mines of Moria, Pippin drops the skeleton into the well, which we know is basically like, I don't know, a nat 1, it's a critical failure, or maybe not, it can be a stealth check that went wrong, that went sideways, but I think it is just so blatant and even comical the way it works, plus the helmet going down the well and hitting stuff and sounding so many times. I would say it's definitely a nat 1 in a stealth check. What else? Then we have in Mines of Moria 2, the Fellowship investigates Balin's tomb, and they try to piece together what happened. That's basically an investigation check, or again, you can not use the check, but put it into the role-playing aspect of it, if the players like that, if the players have had enough information to get to that conclusion, that's an option. Or you could just tell them the information, like, oh yeah, you gotta, I don't know, so you get an 18 in your investigation check, so yeah, your character can clearly see that what happened here because of the skeletons, the decomposition time, because of the fights, the arrows, this thing happened and it was X time ago, both are very good options. What else do we have? We have Gandalf confronting the Balrog. This is not a check itself, but it's very interesting because we have a party that splits. We know that's not always the best of options, but one of the characters, which can be a much higher level or much powerful, because what happens in the Lord of the Rings universe is that Gandalf is basically an angel. He's immortal. We can just assume we have an NPC that's immortal, or maybe even a PC that sacrifices themselves for the rest of the party. But that can basically be a boss encounter. And what happens here is that the party, they know they have to run away because they are not a high enough level to fight the monster, and so that's what they do, or at least most of them. What do we have next? Boromir trying to take the ring away from Frodo. In these kind of cases, I find it so interesting because it's not the player who is proactive about what to do. It's maybe the story or the DM trying to be proactive and making something happen. So, if you have a player with a character that has issues controlling themselves, in this case trying to resist the ring's power, or maybe it can be wealth or whatever, you can make them maybe make checks periodically every 2 or 3 scenes to see if they do something that could harm the rest of the party, like what happened with Boromir, whom you could say had a failed wisdom saving throw, and then because he was trying to chase Frodo, you can make contested rolls between the player who has Frodo and the player who has Boromir. Actually, later in the story, Aragorn refuses the ring, and that can be, again, a successful wisdom saving throw. And if you have played the Lord of the Rings TTRPG or the One Ring TTRPG, you might find the mechanics related to this kind of stuff. And so yeah, if you have played any of those games and you want to teach the rest of us a little bit about those games, you can leave a comment. I would very, very much appreciate it, because I love the One Ring TTRPG and I am pretty sure that many people in our audience haven't played it. What else? In the movie of the Two Towers, we have the moment where Aragorn with Legolas, if I remember correctly, they track Merry and Pippin across Rohan. That's a very good sequence. I would say that's probably, I don't know if a nat 20, maybe it could be a critical success, but it could be maybe a perception / survival check. That would probably be the best for it. Or maybe, if you are the DM, you can ask your player to roll for perception, or they ask you to roll for perception in case they can find something and they succeed. You tell them what they see, but if they want to piece something together, you can then ask for a different roll, or maybe if they have this critical success, just give them the information right away. They might have expertise in the skill. I don't know. I'm just, throwing ideas out there. I am very sure you can use some of these at your table and yeah, enjoy them. You can also leave a like or save the episode if you're on Spotify. We would highly appreciate it. This is an independent podcast. We do our best to bring you the best quality content. So yeah, now we're having some fun. Let's go back to the checks. Later in the movie, we have Merry and Pippin trying to convince Treebeard, the Ent, to attack Isengard. And this could easily be a persuasion check, because in the movie and in the book it takes so long. I would say that if we wanted to replicate that, it would be better to, maybe figure it out through some role-playing instead of a check. But if you were in that situation, if you had players trying to convince another being to join the war, to help you or anything, then maybe a persuasion check is the best option. And yeah, this basically changes the whole battle that comes next through roleplay instead of combat strategy, and that's very important. I think that's something that we as dungeon masters sometimes tend to forget, that disadvantages and disadvantages in the combats themselves can change when our players use roleplay the right way. What do we have next? Aragorn convincing Theoden to ride out of Helm's Deep. That's, again, another persuasion check. That is much more of a check, I would say, because it is only one decision that you want an NPC to make. Yeah, that's basically a persuasion check. I like the moment when Gandalf arrives with the Rohirrim, because it could easily be seen as a Deus Ex Machina, especially if you haven't read the books, because you don't know the lore that lets Gandalf do this. But it's also like, yeah, it comes just at the right time, right? If you don't know what a Deus Ex Machina is, I highly recommend you to go to the first Creative Contraband episode a couple months ago, because I explain it there in detail, and my wife has told me it is the best episode I have done. Some of the audience too, so yeah, I highly recommend it. But I like that moment because it is basically also something you unlock with previous decisions. I mean, the world building is so well done, and the events have unfolded in such a way that it actually makes sense at that moment for that to happen. So yeah, that can perfectly work at your table. Just be careful with it, but it's very valid. And finally, we have the Return of the King. If you are playing a story that is actually very similar to this, again, you can use the same device or technique I mentioned of making a player roll constantly to see if maybe their background or an artifact is affecting them. In this whole movie, in the end, Frodo is struggling a lot to deal with the ring. If your character had something like the ring, like an equivalent or an artifact that is maybe cursed, they should also be rolling for this, probably. What do we have then? Pippin looking into the Palantir and, you know, triggering Sauron being aware of their location. I would say that is the most likely to be replicated by roleplay at a table, because it's not like the player's character is going to be sleeping and then you are going to ask them to roll a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail you make them get up and look into the Palantir. That's just not going to happen, because that's not what the player decided. But we all have played with people who like doing this kind of stuff. I have been that guy before, and sometimes you can tell that the consequences are not going to be too big, and I would suggest as a dungeon master or game master to allow it. And if the consequences are just too big, then yeah, maybe you can think about it twice or something, I don't know. But yeah, I would say that's a very good moment, that's a big moment in the Lord of the Rings story, but one that could happen through roleplay. What else? Then, not much later, Aragorn challenges Sauron through the Palantir. And that is a decision your player is making for their character. So you could ask for a wisdom saving throw or maybe a charisma saving throw if you want them to be able to look through the Palantir successfully. What else do we have? When Aragorn recruits the army of the dead, which I have seen it is a very criticized part of the movie, but I actually like it a lot. When I was a little kid, I just loved it. It was one of my favorite parts of the Return of the King. You could say that is a complete side quest. You can make a complete side quest out of it, because also the advantage you get from being able to recruit them is very, very high. So if you want to give that to your players, then you can build a whole mini story to do that, and in the end, at the last moment, you can reward them for everything they have done, or maybe the background of your character. Maybe your character is a nobleman, like Aragorn kind of is, and you can use that through roleplay to make them succeed at that point of the quest. I love the Army of the Dead subplot, and I would highly suggest to include stuff like that in your games. What else? Well, we have the whole Gollum thing. Gollum and his relationship to Sam. That probably has, I don't know, you can frame the whole relationship as a group of contested checks. Gollum frames Sam with a Lembas breath thing that can be a deception check from Gollum versus insight from Frodo, let's say, or deception versus persuasion from Sam. And yeah, that's also very interesting to analyze from a checks perspective. And when we are actually at Mount Doom, it is very interesting that Frodo actually fails. Frodo fails. There is a foreshadowing where Gandalf says that Gollum is probably going to be very important for their success. If you want to learn a little bit about foreshadowing, I also talked about it in the first episode of Creative Contraband, but that's another topic. Frodo fails. Frodo looks back at Sam and he wears the ring. So that's basically a wisdom saving throw. Probably a very tough one. I don't know, maybe a difficulty check of 18, 24, who knows. But yeah, then comes Gollum, and Gollum does what it kind of has to do. The Tolkien universe is very interesting because these things, the Gollum coming right at the right moment and saving the whole thing and making the ring fall, it's not lazy writing, but quite the opposite. It has lots to do with symbolism. If you want me to make an episode about it, about symbols and stuff, you can leave a comment down below. But yeah, it has lots to do with symbolism and also with what you want your world to represent. I know many of you have your own world building projects, and I am going to say as a final advice, think about what you want your world to represent, not only the fun names, not only the fun places, some geography and some cities. What do these cities represent? What are their values? What are they trying to tell the rest of the world? For example, the orcs are the symbol, are the representation of evil. And that is very important in the Tolkien writing, because that means you cannot have a good orc by definition. In many other stories, we have villains nowadays that maybe want to do good. They just can't, or they just don't know how, or maybe their definition of good is different. And that also makes stories very interesting. But when Tolkien decides to make orcs the representation of evil in the Middle-earth, that changes everything. Because he's trying to make a point through his writing and through his world building. So yeah, that's all for today. Thanks for listening until this moment. Please tell me what you think about lighter episodes like this. It is not as short as I thought it would be, but I hope it was fun. I had lots of fun with it. And yeah, you can find in the description my Instagram, How to Be a Better DM's Instagram, and some of our sponsors. So thank you very much. I am very happy to be here, and I am going to be here next week, next Monday. See you then, and until then, let's roll initiative.
This is Creative Contraband, brought to you by Session Zero Studios.